Hello and welcome to Take a Beat. My name is Tirza and I'm the digital pastor. And Take a Beat is an IES podcast where we invite you to take a little break, chat about things that matter, only to launch ourselves back on the beat. So this podcast episode is airing on the very last day of 2025, and so that's a lot of things to think about. And for a lot of people, that's when, you reflect on the year, you reflect on things that happen. So one of the things for me that I do every year, and not kind of religiously, but there has been some years where I don't do this. But a lot of the times I pray, I ask God for a phrase or a word for the year, like something to focus on, in terms of like my devotions or my studies, things like that. And this year, I think this word has been my word of the year for like different times in my life, but it kind of came back this year, 2025, and the word for me was courage. And like I was praying to God, and I was like, what, like, why courage? And I started to get anxious, right? Why courage? Like, what is it that is going to happen to me in 2025 that will require some serious courage? So just sharing with you, that's the word that I had, like, for me for the year. And now we are at the end of 2025. The day we are recording this, we are not yet at the very end of 2025, but we're getting there. And I kind of have been doing some reflection on courage, and not so much on things that has happened, or things that have, like, situations and different things that I found myself in this year, although there has been plenty, and I realized that there has been quite some circumstances in which I needed to have courage, and I needed to go to the Lord for courage. And so I wanted to talk about courage. And a lot of the times, though, courage, the conversation about courage is very closely linked to fear. And we're afraid of a lot of things. I'm afraid of a lot of things. Fun fact about me, I have this irrational fear of getting stabbed in the back. And so when I sit in a public place, most of the time I will choose the seat that has the back to the wall, so I can see people and people won't be able to, like, sneak up on me and stab me from the back. I don't know where that came from. I've never experienced being stabbed in the back, literally, maybe figuratively, but that's different. And so that's a irrational fear of mine. And if I am, like, I'm someplace with you and I get there first, and I actually don't mind sitting with my back to the rest of the room, it means I trust you. So that's a little fun fact about me. But thinking about courage and reflecting on courage, it always comes kind of hand in hand with fear. And the text that I am thinking about, and so that I kind of have been mulling over, is from Mark 4, and it is this story that we are told by the gospel writer about Jesus calming the storm. So Jesus was with his disciples on a boat, and then it started storming, and they were panicking and they were afraid, and they were anxious, I think, like, and rightfully so, because they were in a situation where it was dangerous, and they had a lot of questions, and they and the question isn't just like, intellectual questions. It's a question of survival. Am I going to survive this? And so Jesus comes out. Well, they came to Jesus, and like Jesus was asleep. And then they woke Jesus up, and they asked Jesus, don't you care that we're going to drown? And then what Jesus did was he woke up, he rebuked the wind and said to the waves, "Silence, be still." And suddenly the wind stopped, and there was a great calm. And what is interesting in this, for me, in this passage, are the questions. If you don't know this yet, or this is the first time that you tune into a Take a Beat episode, I usually have guests with me, and I'm usually the one asking people questions. I love questions. And so a lot of the times when I read passages or stories, I kind of pinpoint the questions. And there are actually quite a few questions here in this passage in Mark 4. The first question, and I'm kind of paraphrasing, it's a question that is asked by the disciples: "Do you care, Lord?" Their question was, "Don't you care that we're about to drown?" But the whole idea behind this question is asking God, "Do you care?" And I think when we are facing difficult things, and when we are facing things that are out of our control, and when we are facing a lot of fear in our lives, the psychological need that we have is for comfort. And I think it's very interesting for me to see that the disciples mistook Jesus resting as him not caring. And I think for me, when I see Jesus, and I put myself in the disciples' like shoes and sandals, whatever they were wearing, and I asked myself, "Oh, would I think that way?" And I said, yes, I would think that way. Like, oh, I am having the panic of a lifetime, and here is the person who says that he cares, and he's sleeping. And usually what I want when I am panicking and when I'm out of my mind because of fear and I'm anxious, I want to share it with a friend who can then be anxious with me, and be worried with me, and be concerned with me, and panic with me. I think there is a temptation to want that. And so when seeing, like the disciples probably seeing Jesus sleeping, their question was, "Are you kidding me? Do you even care? Like, do you even care what's going on in my life right now?" And that's the first question that we see in this passage. And the second question is Jesus. Jesus asked a question to the disciples, and he asked, "Why are you afraid?" And I think that's actually a question that I ask myself a lot. And I actually asked myself a lot this year. Why are you afraid? And I kid you not, when I went to Germany October, September, whatever, one of those Burr months. And I love traveling, but for some reason there was a lot of fear in me, and especially in the first week of being there, I got anxious about doing stuff by myself. In my head, I was like, I've done stuff by myself all the time. I live on my own. I am a grown adult. But then I was dealing with a lot of fear, and I had to ask myself this question that Jesus asked his disciples: "Why are you afraid?" And I think, just reflecting on that, it's probably good for us to list our fears, to list why we're afraid. What are some of the things in our lives right now that are making us afraid. And it's important not because, and some people say, oh, I don't want to give a voice to my fears. But I think we also need to address our fears because our fears can affect how we live our lives. I'll say that again. Our fears can affect how we live our lives. It can affect how we make our choices. Because sometimes we choose things because the other choice is something that we're afraid of. And fear can make us shy away from things that we are supposed to do. Sometimes fear of rejection makes it difficult for us to talk to people about Jesus. Sometimes the fear of being ridiculed is why we don't tell people that we're Christians. We're kind of hush hush about it. And so I think it is very important for us. And I'm not saying this like I've conquered my fears. I have not. There are things that it's still affecting me, and there are still decisions that I realize that I make because I'm afraid, not because it's something that I feel strongly about or that God is calling me to do. But yeah, that's the second question. Why are you afraid? And the third question, actually, I really love this question because the disciples asked this question after Jesus came up. And do you know how I imagine Jesus? He's just like doing his thing, talking to the wind and the waves. And then the disciples asked this question: who is this man that even the wind and the waves obey him? Who is this man? Who is Jesus? And I think that is a good question for all of us to think about. Who is Jesus to you? Who is Jesus? How does that impact you? Because what we think and what we believe about Jesus changes the way we live our lives. It changes the way we make decisions. It changes the way we take steps in our lives. And one of the things that I got, and this is just me sharing my reflection and the musings in my head, it might make sense, some of it, all of it, none of it. But one of the things that I got out of this passage is to know the Lord, to know who Jesus is, especially in terms of like trying to find courage and trying to face fear. It is to know the Lord. And that question that the disciples asked, who is this man? Actually, this question Jesus answered. Jesus answered in that passage. So if we kind of go back and forth in the Bible, in Genesis 1, verse 1, it says, in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth was a formless and desolate emptiness, and darkness was over the surface of the deep, and the Spirit of God was hovering over the surface of the waters. So waters in the ancient language have always symbolized chaos. And the whole conversation of Genesis 1 is of God, the Creator God, bringing order from chaos. And that's why in verse 2 it says, the Spirit of God was hovering over the surface of the waters. And then that the Creator God creating order out of chaos. And then if we kind of fast forward to Revelation 21, because we're going from like the one end of the Bible to the other end of the Bible. Revelation 21, verse 1 through 4, but I'll just read verse 1. It says this, then I saw a new heaven and a new earth, for the first heaven and the first earth had passed away, and there was no longer any sea. And I was like, wait, I love the waters. Like, why are we not like why is it that in the new heaven and the new earth there's not going to be any sea? Um, but it's again like a symbolic language that talks about, it's not even like in earlier in Revelation it talks about how the sea is like glass, so calm. But then in this chapter 21 it talks about how there is no sea, there is no more chaos. And later on in verse 4, I mean, it's a famous verse. It says, God will wipe every tear from their eyes. There will be no more death or mourning or crying or pain, for the old order of things has passed away. And so we see from end to end, the creator God created order out of chaos. And bear with me, I'm going somewhere here. And then Revelation 21, where there is no sea, there is no longer chaos. And the image of Jesus in Mark 4, and this is how I imagine it to play out. Like, Jesus was sleeping, and then his disciples woke him up and asked him, like, do you even care that we're dying? And then he just rubs sleep off of his like eyes, and then stomps up to the whatever that is, the boat, and then just say, be quiet, or just like, apaan sih? Like, just stop it. And then it stills the winds and the waves. And in that moment, I think that Jesus was answering the question that the disciples then ask, who is this man? Because who Jesus is the same God that created the world and created order from chaos, and also the same God who is going to establish the new heaven and the new earth where there is no more chaos. And so in this image of the winds and the waves, and that is an image of chaos, Jesus stood up and said, peace, be still. He's saying he is the same God. And so when I was studying this, I was actually studying this for a sermon, and I was just thinking, okay, the antidote to fear is nothing from our own understanding or my own understanding. It is to know the Lord. It is to know who Jesus is. Jesus is the same God who created order out of chaos. Same God that is going to, at the end of all things, he will create a new heaven and new earth where there is no more chaos. Same God who can calm the chaos that we are currently facing. And so that's my take, is to have courage is to know God, to know the Lord. And Jesus also offers courage. One of the things that is often said in the Bible is, do not be afraid. Don't be afraid. Don't be afraid. Or Jesus would say, take heart. Another way of saying this is take courage. In a different passage in Mark, again, on the sea in a boat. Actually, no, Jesus was walking on the water. Disciples were on the boat. And they were so afraid, they thought Jesus was a ghost, because Jesus was just casually walking on the surface of the water. And when they got scared, he said, don't be afraid. Take courage, I am here. I love that. Take courage, I am here. Like I said earlier, psychologically, when we're afraid, what we need is comfort and courage. And Jesus offers both. He says, take courage. And he comforts us by saying, I am here. So it's not just to know the Lord, but to be with the Lord, I think, is what gives us courage. I don't know what you're facing at the end of this year. And it's not like as soon as the clock strikes midnight, then it's completely blank slate, and everything we fear is going to disappear. The baggage is still there, the bills are still there, the the unknowns are still there. But I think the other thing that needs to still be there as well is taking courage from the Lord. Um, and we know that God is already in the new year, and God is already in the future situations that we have no control over. And He is there, and He is offering to us, take courage, I am here. So, friends, to all of you, Happy New Year. We will see you on another episode of Take a Beat, Don't Miss a Beat.